Study Section 7. Planning for Trade Union Education. Introduction. In this study session, we will be discussing how to plan for trade union education. You will start by highlighting the importance of planning to trade union education. You will then proceed to explain what planning actually involves. You will conclude the session by discussing the many characteristics of planning. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this session, you should be able to explain planning for trade union education. Planning for trade union education. We are now going to discuss planning as one of the 4 basic management functions of trade union education. Planning under this context is conceived as 1. Thinking that leads to performance improvement. 2. Predetermining a course of action. 3. A method for doing a better job of thinking about places to go or better ways to get there. 4. Identification of organizational objectives and the selection of policies, procedures, and method designed to lead to the attainment of the objectives. 5. The selection from among alternatives of future courses of action. 6. Analysis of relevant information from the present and the past and an assessment of probable future development so that a course of action plan may be determined to enable the organization meet its stated objectives. 7. Deciding in advance what to do, how to do it, when to do it, and who should do it. Except by chance, the quality of action cannot exceed the quality of planning in which it is based. Planning is important at every level of organization. Therefore, every manager involved in trade union education has to make plans. For planning to be effective, those who are effecting the plan must be concerned with its implementation besides taking cognizance of the progress made or not made, in addition to taking into consideration unforeseen obstacles that can arise and how to overcome them. Plans are not made to be carved in stone, but to be changed and adapted as the occasion demands. As a plan for one period is being executed, the succeeding plan must equally be underway, nourished by feedback from the first. Decision maker. Decision maker, someone who administers a business. Planning is not a special sort of decision, though dictators, unlike democratic leaders, can find it a useful instrument. For planning per se is not a matter of policies and decisions, it is but the handmaiden to those who carry such responsibility at high and low levels alike. Planning is or should be an integral part of the whole process of any trade union educational management defined in the broader sense. It can help the decision makers at all levels, from the most junior worker to the management, to make better informed decisions. It can do this by helping them to see clearly the specific objectives in question, the various options that are available for pursuing these objectives, and the likely implications of each planning can help to attain larger and better aggregate results within the limits of available resources. To achieve such benefits, however, planning must use a wide-angle lens through which a great many interlocking variables can be put in focus and all of them seen as part of a dynamic organic whole as a system susceptible of system analysis. To achieve such benefits, however, before recommending any one course of action, planners must first see what room the decision makers have. For maneuver, they must look, for instance, at the state of the society where they want the plan effected and what it will require educationally to accomplish it, at the nature of the workers, their needs, aspirations, and practical prospects. The planners should also bear in mind the state of the knowledge of the beneficiaries and the state of the educational art and technology, as well as the innate ability of the industrial system to examine itself critically and to make intelligent action to improve its own performance. The world of trade union education has been changing rapidly and drastically since the Industrial Revolution, due to a combination of a familiar revolutionary force that has now shaken the entire world. We shall examine the kind of impact which these revolutionary forces have had on trade union education and how all this has created the need for a fundamentally new kind of trade union educational planning. It will pay us first, however, at some of the broader conceptions, explanations, perceptions, and considerations of what planning for trade union education actually involves. What planning involves? Planning involves an attempt at thinking about the present problem, our future goals, and the required strategies. Planning has to do with the consideration of the most suitable and effective ways in which our available meager resources could be utilized to the maximum. Without adequate planning, problems may arise from various angles. For instance, there may be problems in our effort to go forward with a program or in our effort at modification or execution of the program. For illustrative purposes, a wage earner needs to plan how this monthly wage would be spread over his necessities over a month. In doing this, he needs to define and identify his priorities. A farmer, in the same vein, has to plan his work to know when to clear the land, till the land, plant his crops, weed the land and maintain the crops, harvest and store them, and eventually market his products. Through adequate planning, he knows the appropriate time to carry out each assignment, and when the plan is not followed, his crop may fail. Because of the uncertainty of what the future holds in stock, planning becomes an important tool that can be used to reduce risks. It is the laying of the foundation on which the major building would stand. Where the foundation is defective or weak, the whole structure collapses. Nevertheless, it has been discovered that at times a good plan may not in itself guarantee the success of a program, particularly where the planner lacks the necessary data and facts with which to carry out his plan, or where the available data are false. This is why every plan should allow for flexibility, change, or modification as occasion demands. Characteristics of planning. Planning generally has certain special characteristics, and for the plan to succeed, these characteristics must be present in it. The first of such characteristics is that the planner must first of all recognize that the plan is not a blueprint. The plan must allow for changes at any time because it is sometimes a Herculean task to predict the nature of things. What succeeds under one situation, in one environment, or at a particular time may fail in other. Hence, the need for flexibility. For instance, human resources, which are the major component of any training program, are themselves dynamic and subject to time, environment, situation, the program involved, and the trainees. Secondly, any training plan that would succeed has to be realistic in the sense that it must take into consideration the identified problem, the situation to be tackled, and the target population. In addition to this, any training plan is expected to be economical and devoid of extravagance. This is necessary in order to justify the expenditure. For instance, the plan should be one that could bridge the identified gap and correct the deficiency noticed. This is why every possible alternative ought to be explored to make sure that maximum efficiency is achieved at a minimum cost to an organization. Another important characteristic expected of a good training plan is that it must be timely and executed to nip any problem in the bud. The timing and the goal of the training program are two variables that must occur concurrently. If a program is delayed, event might overtake it, and by the time it is finally executed, it might become virtually useless and of little or no significant value to the organization. Delays may occur as a result of changes in technology, economy, situation, and so on. There is also the need to make any training plan problem-centered as well as goal-oriented. Any plan that fails to consider this is bound to be ineffective. The plan should show how the potential or envisaged problem will be solved. In essence, we do not necessarily have to wait for a problem to arise before we think of how to solve such problem. This is why we suggest preventive training rather than the corrective one currently going on in some establishments. Any type of training or education course is likely to be more effective if it is planned systematically with the planning and execution following a logical sequence. Therefore, in making our plan for any course, it is essential to follow a well-laid-out sequence. The need for such a sequence arises because it will then be easier to go over the plan regularly and correct or modify deficiencies. A good sequence would be as shown below. The training plan. Identification of problem. Identification of training need. Defining training objective. Definition of content. Actual planning. Executing the plan. Assessment / appraisal of needs. Setting training objective. Designing the program. Evaluating plan to objective, criteria, indicators. Figure 7.1 Sequence of planning. These identified steps, which will be briefly discussed below, must be taken in consultation with the organization, taking into consideration the environment, the would-be course participants, the resources available, the type of problem to be solved, and so on. We shall now take a cursory look at the identified steps in planning a training program. As can be seen from the figure above, these steps are identification or definition of the problem where the reasons for any cause are determined. Such reasons may include the need to correct a deficiency, to prevent a deficiency, to motivate the workers, to improve upon present competence, and so on. This is followed by the identification of the specific training need, down to evaluating the outcome of a particular training program, where the identified objectives of the original program will be assessed as to their achievement or otherwise. The concluding evaluation would also be able to tell us whether the criteria used not only in planning but also in expecting the program are appropriate. The program can be repeated or modified, or whether it should be discontinued. Study section summary. In this study session, you discuss the importance of planning in the trade union education, under which you explained what is required to carry out a proper planning. You also went further to discuss the different characteristics of planning in the trade union education. This is the end of study section 7. Thanks for listening.